Thank you guys all for coming out. They gave me the best spot Friday before Labor Day, so I appreciate it. And I want to talk about urbanism today. Let me actually get the theme being how we think local investment is going to foster and change creative urban development. We wanted to hold it in this space. As some of you may know, the most recent project we did on Fundrise was this property. Any resident of DC or Virginia could invest in this property at $100 a share. I know we have at least one investor in the audience. But I want to talk about how local people investing in local real estate is going to change what's built, is going to change how things are done. I'm going to start with a background of how it is today, how it's going to change, and then tell our story from Fundrise. So here are some charts. I'm going to walk through it, hopefully not too technical. But what this shows is real estate as it is today is really dominated by large funds, large institutional groups of money. It started in the early 90s. Right now, as you can see, basically it's dominated by large institutional groups. And what this means is in the past where it was local families, local people investing in business, investing in real estate, it's now big disconnected groups that aren't near the community. They tend to be out of New York, they're distant, they're not connected to what's actually going on. And these huge pools of money, and what they end up doing is they come into neighborhoods, they invest, the baseball district, NOMA, and there's no soul, there's nothing that's tangible there. It doesn't feel like it should fit for that community. It's institutional, it's the same thing that you see in another city, same thing you see in DC, and that kind of standard big office tower with terrible retail. I mean, you guys all know what I'm talking about, where you're in a different city and it should feel unique, but it ends up feeling the exact same. And that's a product of large players investing that are not local to the community. And so this is how money is invested in real estate today. A person works, they put it with a pension fund, that pension fund puts it with an investment broker, the investment broker puts it with a private equity firm, they put it with a real estate broker and it ends in the property. So you could live a block away, actually own a piece of a project nearby, but there's 6 people in the middle that have their hands in between. And what this ends up doing is not only is it really expensive to have 5 people in the middle of it, but it also completely disconnects your investment from the tangible thing that you're invested in. So you're not connected to the property, you're not connected to what's happening. It's some people in the middle making decisions purely based on financial reasons. And so what we think is going to change in the future, and we're leading this with Fundrise, but there's a lot of other people around the country doing it, is by allowing people to invest directly in local real estate, it's going to change what's built, what's possible. One, that they'll actually know what they're invested in. Most people have investments, they're really vague and opaque. There's a tangibility and they'll actually be connected to something. And then most importantly, when they change what they're investing in, they're actually able to change the asset. And we wanted to use this as an example of people investing locally would much rather see a Vigilante coffee. They'd rather have a great local tenant. They'd rather have great architecture. They'd rather make these trade-offs on values when they're investing themselves. Whereas when an institutional group investing, they don't value that. They're not local, they don't care what the tenant is, they just want someone to pay them rent. And so what we think is going to happen is as crowdfunding, as all of these kind of new regulations are loosened, when people are connected to what they're investing in, they have the ability to change what's possible. They have the ability to go to zoning meetings and help get approvals. They have the ability to help go find tenants. So by making the connection direct, we think it's going to change the type of stuff that's built, and it's going to start to resemble more community-oriented stuff that's actually linked to what should be there locally as opposed to what people from outside the city are deciding. And so now I kind of want to tell our story of how we got there. The front was the initial dry part. And so we began doing real estate development projects on 8th Street Northeast. In '09, we started buying a couple properties farther, a couple blocks away. And as we took a few of these properties to your traditional institutional Wall Street type firms, they just didn't know what we were talking about. They didn't actually know 8th Street Northeast. And this is in '09 when it wasn't very early. Anybody locally knew 8th Street. Tons of people lived by, bought homes, loved the neighborhood. but most of the groups that are investing downtown, and they really aren't connected to neighborhoods. They didn't know 8th Street. At that point, we were talking Maquetto, and Chris is actually going to be part of the first project. They had never been to Tokyo Underground, they didn't know Maquetto. They had no connection to what was actually happening. And we kind of stepped back and said, who should be investing in these projects? And I thought it's a local community, people that live nearby, people that grew up in the neighborhood, people with a tangible connection to that project that want to support it not only because of the investment purpose, because of the other benefits. Because they own a home nearby, it's going to help values, it's going to change blight, it's going to take an abandoned building and turn it into something interesting or creative. And then they'll also be able to make the trade-offs of, I'd rather have this type of tenant, I'd rather pay more for better architecture and actually decide what's being built. And so what we did is we took our first property, 1351 8th Street Northeast, spent about a year with tons and tons and tons of lawyers trying to figure out how can we allow anybody to invest with us in these properties. I'll go a little bit into the security side, but almost all investment is done by high net worth accredited investors because the SEC's view is if you're wealthy, you can take care of your money, they're going to lightly regulate it. But if you want to actually allow anybody to invest in property, or really any business, it took an enormous amount of legal work. And as that was happening, the Jobs Act was passed, and securities industry was basically loosened up. So what we're doing, what was very difficult to the first time, is going to be much easier. So we took this project, spent about a year working with the SEC, and last August launched Fundrise with this as the first project, allowing anybody in DC, Virginia to invest at $100 a share. And what we tried to do is create branded real estate product that people were excited about. We spent a long time finding a great tenant. Maquetto, again, Chris is going to be part of it. It's going to be an Asian night market with a retail store in the front, coffee shop upstairs. There's going to be beautiful architecture. We tried to pick what is something that a traditional investment group would not want to touch at all. They have no credit, they have no operating history, they have no anything. It's a unique building, but this is something that people locally want to support. And the comparison we often use is every single bank would rather finance the Sbarros, where almost everyone in here would rather go eat at a local Italian restaurant. And so where the money goes and what the money's financing is actually not what consumer demand is, but there's a huge gap. And it's because the way banks and financial groups underwrite things relates to credit, relates to something that they can tangibly see. They don't know that Tokyo Underground has thousands. They don't look at Twitter and value that. They don't know that they actually have a great reputation in the neighborhood. And so they're not able to make those judgments where somebody locally can decide by investing what they want to be part of, what they want to see happen. And so this was the first project. We raised $325,000 from 175 people. It closed in 3 months, and now it's currently under construction just 50 blocks away. I actually love this one right here. So they've been digging out the basement, gutting the whole building. You can see they stripped off the entire back. They're going to have a glass facade that goes all the way to the back. It's really going to be a special project. And what we wanted the first project to be was something that people walk in and they understand this is what's possible with people being able to invest locally. This is a type of development that can happen, stuff that's relevant to the community, stuff that helps local businesses and entrepreneurs get started, and stuff that's actually connected to where people live and what they want to see. Here's some more photos, restoring and saving all the old bricks. And so we had tested with one property, and what we've been doing the past 6 months is now scaling Fundrise as a platform that allows anybody to invest in local properties. So this actually just closed a few weeks ago. We took this property public. Anybody in DC, Virginia can invest at $100 a share. I think we have some people that have invested in this. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to facilitate people connecting to their community, being part of what's happening around them, having the power to shape how their neighborhood's built, and in that way transform how things are developed. Because it's really a bizarre idea, but you live here and you have no control over what's built across the street from you. The only way you can really have input is going to community meetings, and generally that's a negative way of influencing. You try to block the project. Whereas with people participating, investing, they can go, they can actually help shape and make the decisions on what actually happens there. And so what we think, and why I think this ties to urbanism is really going to change how development happens. Instead of these monolithic, standardized, commoditized real estate projects that end up shaping the fabric of the community. You look at Noma as an example of it feels like somebody built it from the outside. It doesn't relate to what was there before. They just knocked everything down and built skyscrapers. Whereas you look at H Street Northeast, it was all local development. It was, Joe Engler came out here early. It was entrepreneurs just opening up small businesses, and now all the big players have, recently come in, and hopefully the neighborhood stays interesting. But it's an example of what happens when it's actually people connected to the community, and the stuff that gets built ends up being much more tangible, much more related to what should be here. Here's some photos of this property. And what's been really interesting is that we were trying to do this. We built Fundrise as a way for us as a real estate development company to connect with people locally, build an audience of people participating in our projects, and help us finance what are difficult, creative, really out there projects. And as we did this, tons of other developers around the country have come to us wanting the exact same thing. In all types of neighborhoods. I was in Cleveland a couple months ago, which is in Portland. This is not unique. This is a generational trend that urban creative use of spaces, effort co-work, is all the hot topics that everyone knows, but it's about making something that relates to what's happening here, that actually supports local business, that's actually design-oriented, that has a presence, that feels like it should be there. So really what we're doing and what I think is going to be amazing coming in the next 10 years is that the past 30 years of commoditized, every mall feels the exact same, a lot of urban areas feel the exact same, is going to start being a blend of much more unique and local projects. And that's going to be because local people are now going to be able to invest directly in them. And by investing in these projects, they can support and define them for what matters to them. And so we're extremely excited about it. I think it's going to be a huge change, not only in real estate development, but architecture. If you're really interested in architecture, you can invest in very creative architecture projects. You can invest in zero net energy developments. You can invest, we even view the streetcar, urban transit. Why isn't that something that people are able to support? The mayor cut funding and hundreds of people emailed him. The only way they had to do was email him. It would be much better if they could actually invest and then support and finance the project. So our thought is that what's going to happen is people are going to actually realize that they have power to collaborate, join together, and actually influence what's built around them, instead of waiting for this kind of top-down master planned approach. And I think that same theme is going to be happening all over the country, all over the world, where people are going to take that power into their own hands, and what's going to be built is going to be much more creative, much more interesting, and be some place that people want to live.